my co-host, Scott McLaughlin. And today we are going to continue our talking about sex. After listening to our previous podcast, we realised there's so much more about this. And we've also got a sex therapist lined up for future podcasts to really dig deep on this because it's such an important topic. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thank you, Lan. It is an important topic, and you and I have jested a few times that the whole podcast could be about this. But so I think, we covered a bit last time about, being in situ in a relationship and talking or not talking about it. We wanted to cover a bit more today, and hopefully when Anna joins us in a week or two, we can go even deeper again. So, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thank you. Something that really stuck out for me that I thought we should clarify a little bit more was when you were talking about being in a relationship with a very highly sexed lady that you felt a bit unsafe. And I don't want to make this about your experience there because a lot of people feel this level of unsafety. And I thought it really valuable to expand on feeling safe and unsafe in relationship. A lot of people may not realise that the extent of childhood sexual abuse is about 1 in 4. And this is not just for women, but men as well. And that's 25%. So if you think about how many people you have actually had sex with, if you know the number, a quarter of them have been sexually abused, at least. And then there are people who go through the experience of date rape or abuse within their relationship, whether that be coercive sex or rape. And yes, you can be raped in your own relationship. If you don't agree, then it's rape. If you agree, but you agree because you're keeping the peace and you are coerced, can bring up trauma as well. And then there are all the people who just have sex because they want to keep their partner happy. They can't deal with the whinging and whining or silent treatment. And so they have sex anyway, and that can actually be quite traumatic as well. And all of those things lead to a lack of safety and a lack of trust in relationship. And this is for everybody. It doesn't matter how you identify sexually. This is an issue for every single human who chooses to have sex. And it's important to understand that building trust at the very beginning of a relationship is vital to a long-lasting and happy relationship, particularly when it comes to sex and intimacy. And that also includes consent, which is something that a lot of people of our generation, say 40 and above, kind of struggle with because it's not something that we were brought up with. It's certainly not something I've ever really been taught. It's something that I've learned along the years as an adult. And it's not something I consciously think about, but I guess because I've been in a long-term relationship now. But consent is really important and valuable, and it's a part of setting clear boundaries, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too that, again, it's just, there's a lot of miscommunication, right? And I think as a man, if you feel, well, certainly for me, I'm going to just speak for me, right? But for me, if I feel like someone's doing it because they feel obligated to, it's actually worse than them not doing it. At the same time, if a woman doesn't feel like it, I've experienced very few occasions where I've understood why. And that's helpful, right? It could be, like legitimately, if it could be like, I'm tired or I feel sick or you didn't take the garbage out last night and it really pissed me off or whatever the case may be. Those truths need to come to the surface. It could
simply be, that's true, but it could actually simply be, I'm just not turned on right now. I'm just not into it. My brain is big and sex is like the last thing I feel like doing right now. And for a lot of people, what can happen is it can be seen as a rejection or felt as a rejection, rather than looking at the other person and acknowledging that, oh, okay, they're not in the mood and it doesn't actually have to be about me. But I want to go back to this idea of trust in relationship and consent, and being able to talk to your partner about what feels safe for you, because it actually is really a hard conversation, isn't it?
It is, and I think I don't know why it snapped into my head just now, but I remember doing some tantric learning, and I remember that they talked about source power or something to that effect, and the men's comes from the groin area, and women's comes from the head area, and I think as an analogy that's really interesting, right? Because a lot of guys are like, well, there's physicality in this for me, and my power source is coming from, you know, my bits, as opposed to coming from my head and how I feel or any of that sort of stuff. Maybe that's a good analogy to understand the differences between, you know, what gets us going, so to speak.
Yes. And I just want to say for a second, Scott, well, if you didn't say call your bits, what would you actually call them? Because part of talking about sex is actually using the correct terminology.
Oh, wow. I've been shamed. Well, I'm
Just
trying not to be
pointing it
offensive
out.
for other people, but yeah, okay.
But you know what? Talking about penises and vaginas and cervixes and labias and clitorises and testicles and all of that sort of thing, it is what it is. If we were talking about our elbow, it wouldn't be offensive. So, you know what? I don't think we need to be offended
Fair
by
enough.
talking
Okay.
about our actual body parts. Yeah, and it is uncomfortable. I totally get it. And I think this is part of what we all need to learn. And look, I'm not saying that I'm really good at it either, to be honest with you. I'm good at it when talking about it with my clients or with other people. But when it comes to talking about myself, I do feel that, oh, so embarrassing. But I push through that embarrassment because I know it's important to get used to it.
Yeah, it's good practice, isn't it? I mean, if you can actually, it's good practice. I mean, I think, you know, if I'm reflecting on why did I say bits, because we just don't talk about that stuff. And, you know, I want this podcast to be something that people are comfortable with, but at the same time, that's not really our job, is it? Our job is to bring up topics that matter and in ways that maybe people are uncomfortable with. So it's, yeah. And I think it's really super interesting that, and what I was trying to point out in my point was that there's different drivers for in heterosexual relationships for men and women, and in homosexual relationships for women and women and men and men. There's different things that occur and different roles that are taken on, and I guess what we do poorly as a rule is talk about how we feel, talk about how it makes us feel, talk about how we feel in the moment and whether we feel like it. And so I think, you know, to your point about consent, I think for the vast majority of time, I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than somebody, you know, having sex with me out of duty. Yuck. Like that's not, you know, that's not sexy. That's not arousing. And in fact, you know, the more somebody's turned on with me, the better I'm turned on, you know, I'm just maybe it's, but, and
I mean, that would be lovely. Yeah, that would be lovely if that's the case, if that's how it was all the time. But there are many, many people who actually don't care, which is really sad, as long as they get to achieve their end result, which is orgasm. They don't care what their partner feels. And it's really sad that a lot of people think that sex is about orgasm when actually it's not really. Like when you really dig deep, it's about that physical connection and all of that. And so it's important that I think this conversation around sex is so valuable, because when we don't feel into our bodies, like feel into our hearts and our minds, and really build that sense of trust, then it just does become about orgasm and not about connection.
Yeah, look, maybe I've got a strong feminine vibe about me, but I've also been in relationships where I started to play that role where I just wanted to be satisfied, and the truth is that's a great shortcut for me to understand I'm in the wrong relationship. You know, if it stops being about intimacy for the purposes of sharing love, then you're in the wrong place, is my view. But I don't disagree that many people do just, you know, think about their own needs in that moment. And even, you know, I'll tell you that, you know, I've had partners that where I've been completely exhausted, and it'll be, you know, 11:30 at night, and they want to go, and I can think of nothing less. Like, I just want to go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
And even as a man, I'm like, well, hey, this is not it's not really what I want, and it doesn't actually make me feel good because you're not actually meeting me where I am.
Exactly.
I'm exhausted.
And
I'm not really into it, and you don't care.
Yeah. And that's what consent and trust building is all about. And consent doesn't have to be this, you know, sign of document and all that sort of stuff. It can simply be, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying this? Do you want me to keep going? Do we need to stop? Do you feel safe with me? And if it's a very, very new relationship, even checking in, you know, what is it that you want from this evening or today or whatever it is? You know, what is it that you actually want? Do you actually want to have sex? Are you ready? You know, all of that sort of stuff. You know, you're really starting to get to know each other and where you're at. And it can be actually such a turn on for people who have felt unsafe in previous relationships to finally be seen, heard, and acknowledged and looked at as, wow, how I feel and what I think is really important to this person. That's amazing.
Well, and that's a really, really good point, and I was about to go there. You know, what people bring from previous relationships is super important and often negatively impactful about the intimacy you can share together. You know, I've been in situations where people have had trouble and it's been completely informed by their previous experiences.
Yeah.
And there was one particular case where it took nearly 6 months of us being together before things started to turn a corner. And her paradigm started to shift a little bit in the right direction because she'd spent 20 years in a completely different paradigm. And we have to appreciate that. We have to be patient with people. And we have to try to understand that as well. Like, you know, understand where we've come from. I mean, equally, I've had situations where one particular situation where I had someone come over and I thought we were watching a movie and she was so overtly aggressive that I was really triggered. And I asked her to leave my house immediately. Like, it was too much. And and so, you know, she didn't read the room from my perspective, that's for sure. But, you know, and that was because of a previous experience I'd had. So it's super important to understand and even just be inquisitive, ask. And there's that fine balance between trying to understand what people's former sexual experiences were without feeling insecure about them.
Absolutely. Yes, that is so true. And I've heard other so-called relationship coaches say, or one in particular, say, you know, we shouldn't have to talk about previous partners and sexual experiences because, you know, that's in the past and it's not needed. And I feel a little bit horrified by that statement because I think it actually forms who we become. And we don't need to go into details and you know, that sort of thing, but it's actually healthy to feel secure enough. It's actually, it is healthy to feel secure enough to be able to talk about and acknowledge that you had a life before me. And every single day of your life before me has created who you are now. And so if you've had fantastic sexual experiences and you want to somehow go there again in that, that way. And what was so good about it? What did you love about it? What is it about you in that moment that was so good? Can we somehow go there again? Are you past that stage of your life now? And on the flip side of that, what were the bad experiences? What did you hate? What don't you like? Because it all is about who you are, and it is in the past. So if we feel insecure about our partner's previous sexual relationships, then that's probably something to work on, either as a couple or as an individual.
Yeah, and it depends. I mean, I'm going to find this video and put it in the links. But there was an American comedian who was talking about being in a new relationship and how she hated her ex-boyfriend, but in sexually with her new boyfriend, she was like, "For God's sake, do it like Greg."
That's not good.
But not that she said that to him. But anyway,
Yeah.
that was the joke. And I've been in a situation where, in a relationship where my partner was kind of proud of herself for going on a bit of a Tinder rampage, and she'd been in a very long-term relationship and all that sort of stuff, and she was really proud of herself for being. And equally, in hindsight, I reflect and go, she wanted to be accepted for that. But for me, that content coming at me and the detail that was coming at me was really inappropriate. And didn't make me feel safe, and didn't make me feel like she would be loyal, and didn't make me feel special. And so there's a fine line between talking about what's worked for you in the past, and you don't have to say where it's come from.
No.
And I think that's the line. I think the line in the sand is, I like it this way, but you don't need to say just like Frank did. Or I think that's the line, right? That's the line.
I think so.
I think it's really inappropriate to talk about that stuff with ex-partners.
Yeah, you don't need to go into detail, for sure. Like, there's no way I would say, oh, I did Y with partner Z and you need to do it exactly the same. But that's way too much information, because then it kind of gives you a visual, which can be really awkward and uncomfortable.
Hurtful as
that's
well.
What would happen for me anyway. Yeah, I don't want to know all the gory details, but I do want to know what worked for you and what didn't work for you, and why. Like, do you feel comfortable with this? Do you not? Have you had a bad experience in the past that I need to know about, so I can make sure I don't traumatize you with anything that I do? What can I do? This may be just a very simple question that you can ask with people who are new in your relationship. What do I need to do to make sure you feel safe so we have great sex?
Yeah, and it's interesting because with a lot of porn-informed sex these days as well. I must admit, I'm pretty bad personally at adopting these things. If someone says to me, "Why don't you pull my hair?" I'm like, it doesn't occur to me to be violent. It's just it just doesn't occur to me naturally. So if you want me to be that way, you really need to ask. But there is a lot of porn-informed sex out there, and people have had experiences around that don't occur to us naturally, that they either like or they think they should like. And that's a really interesting point. I've been with people before where I've thought, do you really want to do that, or do you think that I want you to want to do that?
Yeah.
Because what I want you to do is be yourself, and however that shows up, right? And that's a huge conflict, particularly in the context of, oh God, all the material and the crap that we've got around us, the OnlyFans, the Chatterbaits, the YouPorns or Pornhubs or whatever. I mean, it's just, how do you get a grasp? And I had a young 22-year-old guy I was sort of coaching, and he said to me, "I just don't understand. Like, why don't they just show up and be normal?" I went, "What do you mean?" He goes, I find it really conflicting and confronting that they're so sexualized." I went, "Really?" And if you think about that generation, they've been brought up with access to porn at your fingertips, and this is where they're sadly where they're learning about intimacy in inverted commas, because it ain't intimacy, but and I think everyone gets a little discombobulated, right?
Yeah, that is sad. Yeah, it's a good word. And that's why conversations are so important. So,
Yeah.
After a sexual experience, I feel it's okay to ask your partner, are you okay with what just happened? How do you feel? I feel great, or I feel whatever, or I'm wondering if you actually enjoyed that, or I'm wondering if blah, 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 whatever it is that you're wondering about. Like, just be curious and gentle in your tone. And it doesn't have to be like the second after, like probably not the second after, but maybe, a little bit after. In when you feel comfortable and when both of you are relaxed enough to reflect on where are you at with that,
Yeah.
and what could be different. If do you need anything to be different, or I would like something to be different. It doesn't have to always be about the other person. It can be, I felt that we went too hard, or we went too soft, or I would like to do this a little bit differently. What do you think? And just this real gentle, open curiosity is really so valuable in getting that consent and getting that trust.
Well, it's kind of it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing too, right? Because it takes trust to actually open your mouth in the first place.
Absolutely.
But I think like Leanne started this podcast. I mean, I think this is so important because the amount of men that I've interviewed that are in long-term relationships that are completely dissatisfied and don't talk. And then there is the actual act itself, if indeed it does happen. And yet again, the communication is really poor. And I've said it in previous podcasts, but I want to say it again. Men, we bring judgment to a shame party, and we have to be, firstly, acutely aware of that, right? Women have to be aware of their shame, and men have to be aware of their judgment. And we have to knowingly go into a connection, knowing that we bring that with us, that it's not our fault, that we've actually been taught to be ashamed and to be judgmental.
Yeah.
We've been taught to be that way. And it's inherited, but we have to at least show up and know that that's where we're starting from. We've got two handicaps going on. And if we both understand our own handicaps and the other person's handicap, we can help each other get to a point of real connection and truth. And, like I said, I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying this because I think it's such an important point, and it's such a limitation for men particularly, and for women. And for women, so yeah, when you do come together with somebody, please know that you're bringing stuff with you that's not helpful.
Absolutely. And I want to point out that a lot of men also feel shame. So it definitely works both ways. And women can be extremely judgmental as well. And you mentioned about, not being poor communication. So one very quick tip is, if you're unhappy with your sex life and you say to your partner something like, you really need to step up, we're not having enough sex, I'm really pissed off about this, I'm not happy, blah, 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 and it's all about blaming your partner, then that's not going to help. What that's going to do is shut down your partner, and it's going to get worse.
Correct.
So to discuss how you're feeling with your partner, it's really important to use I statements. I'm feeling disconnected. I'm feeling unhappy. I would love to talk to you about what's going on here. Like really slowing down, feeling into your heart, well, what's actually going on? It's not just about I'm not having enough orgasms, because if that's really what's going on for you, fix yourself up. That's what masturbation's all about. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be blunt there, because it really annoys me when people think that their partner is expected to give them an orgasm. That's totally not going to work for you. So communicate in a way that is soft and gentle and says, I statements. I am feeling abandoned, rejected, whatever it might be, and I don't know what to do about it. Maybe we need to see someone, something along those lines. Anyway, I've just noticed
I was going to say,
we get to 25 minutes already. That's insane.
I have no idea. And, we thought, we'll do another episode, but there's probably going to be more. I think what we ought to do is when we get Anna in, maybe we do a follow-up to her session and talk some more based on what she tells us, because she'll go a lot deeper into the lived experience in the bedroom. So,
yes.
hey, so thank you everyone for listening. This is, hopefully you got something out of this. And Leanne, any final comments?
No, excellent. If you have enjoyed our podcast, I would love it if you could like, share, and tell everyone to listen in. That would be awesome.
Great. Thanks a lot. And thanks again for listening, guys. We'll look forward to talking at you, with you, something next time.
Thank you. Bye.